And welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And uh-oh, it today's topic is beyond boundaries. So many of us have a conversation about boundaries, about cultivating healthy boundaries. And today we're going to explore another way of viewing this whole notion, which should be interesting. But before we get started, let's just take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So we're talking about boundaries. It's a big conversation. Is I didn't have enough boundaries, or I didn't have healthy boundaries. I need to develop boundaries. And when what we're talking about when we talk about boundaries is essentially creating some kind of protection or separation between ourselves and other influences, perhaps. And the concept of boundaries is a really useful tool. There's no question that it's useful. It helps us get to a place where we can sort of fortify ourselves. But or and I think with many tools, we outgrow them. It's kind of like the training wheels on a bicycle. You may start out with training wheels and they allow you to establish some sense of balance and some sense of confidence. And then we get to a point where we take off the training wheels. And I think that's where this conversation is going. I'm not belittling the value of the notion of boundaries. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning. I recognize the value of the notion of boundaries as we're growing into understanding ourselves and growing into finding ways of navigating a lot of challenges. But and and we're going to do both and here. I am extending an invitation to consider another vantage point. So I don't know that we all agree that we're energetic beings. However, we're going to operate from that premise today, that everything is energy and that we are energetic beings. And when we think about this notion of boundaries, what we're doing is creating sort of a block of the flow of certain energies. We could think about it that way, right? So certain things can't penetrate. That's the whole idea, is protection, right? Protection and containment, both. Well, it's recently been coming into my awareness around energy and flow that this notion of containment isn't really where I want to go. And I think probably not where a lot of us want to go. What we want is to be able to be unbounded. And I think when we're calling for boundaries, what we're really calling for is greater coherence. And I've looked at my life and I've looked at circumstances from clients, and what seems to be the case is that when we're calling for boundaries, what is at play is that our energy is very diffuse. Our energy it's chaotic. It's unordered, unstructured. And rather than boundaries, and this is the same conversation I have with folks about the notion of protection. I have to protect myself. Rather than building all these walls and protections, obstructions, what our best approach for our fullest expression is to become more coherent, to create or to organize that energy. And as I imagine it, what I'm imagining is a lattice work. And I'm using the word lattice rather than structure, because lattice in my reference, and this is personal, but what I'm trying to get to is that it's a living, dynamic framework. So like a golden lattice, if we can imagine a golden lattice of light, for example, where there's coherence, there's organization. It's not everything everywhere all at once. And with this coherence that we can create within ourselves, what happens is that the energies around us don't move our our foundation in ways that have us be dissipated and scattered. We use these words, right? I feel scattered or confused, can't find my center, um, lost myself, right? All of these words are words that are in alignment with the inclination to create boundaries. So as a kid, like 12 years old, I wrote a poem about I built a castle with a moat around it and I'm protected. And then I discovered I couldn't find my way out. And as with so many things, when we build these walls, initially they're great because they offer us the protection. When we create these boundaries, they're great because they offer us the opportunity to breathe, to take a breath where we're not in being constantly assaulted, but they can outlive their usefulness, just like so many other behaviors, right? And then we become trapped in them, and we become at the effect of them rather than having them as tools. They become the definition of the reality that we're experiencing, and we become subject to them. However, when we work with coherence, what we're talking about is coming into alignment, deliberately finding that center, allowing our essence and expression and energetic expression of alignment, of integration, of this golden lattice of light that is responsive and dynamic, and yet has its own, I'm going to use the word structure, even though it sounds, to me, it sounds more concrete, but there's we don't want to be rigid. This structure needs to be able to move and flow and grow and transform, but it still offers a foundation. It still offers a framework through which we can interact and interplay with life. So, an analogy I used yesterday was moving from a gaseous state, which is this state of diffusion and kind of chaos, to a liquid state where there's a flow, but there's alignment. And I deliberately didn't use the analogy of going to a solid state because that's fixed. Well, or most observably fixed and static. And so what we're looking at is finding an integration. And what I notice about myself and others as we grow, as we are able to remove the interference and the chaos, as we're able to come into greater coherence, we actually have greater flexibility and greater adaptability in life. We're better able, we're in certain ways, we're more fortified, even though there's no fort anymore, to be able to interact with life as it arises through this organized fluidity. And it's not conscious organization. You know, we can't say, okay, we're putting this over here and that over there and organizing it in that way. But what this conceptualization offers that's different from boundaries is that water can pretty much flow anywhere. We can, and water, of course, has its own intelligence, along with pretty much everything else, I would imagine. But we can allow ourselves to flow and still be water. And interestingly, I'm just thinking biologically, we're 90 some percent water. And I don't think it's an accident, you know, that we can allow ourselves to remain ourselves without having to brace against life. This is an ideal. It's an ideal. It's not something that we get to necessarily just decide, okay, I'm going to be water, or I'm going to be organized, have this foundational coherence. But I think that that's what we want to move toward. And if we conceptualize coherence, it's almost as if in this gaseous, chaotic state, that we're all over the place. And we can't distinguish between what is of our essence and what is not. And it's rather than creating boundaries, I'm imagining pulling parts of ourselves back to ourselves, pulling our essence back. And I all of a sudden I just had this image of yarn everywhere, just in a tangle. And what we're talking about doing is just drawing that back in, drawing our energy back in to be more coherent, wrapping that yarn, winding that yarn into a ball, into some coherent form. I invite you to feel into it, because I think it's a very different feeling to be scattered, to not know who we are, to have lost ourselves, to have lost trust in ourselves, to have lost our sense of unity within ourselves, our sense of coherence. And what happens is that we look outside ourselves to pull in something, some sense of security, to try and get that coherence or that structure, that stability externally. And when we do that, we're diffusing ourselves even further. It's kind of like we're giving away our energy. This is all really fundamentally about energy management. Because when we're in that chaotic state, it takes a lot of energy to try and function, even, right? When we're more coherent, it's like the battery has the charge, everything is working together. And so just if you want to take a moment to imagine drawing your energy into a golden lattice of light, just imagine it and feel into it. Just allow yourself to invoke that image and that the experience of that. If you were to draw your energies in, not in a constrictive way, but to draw them into organization, into this shimmering, beautiful, vibrating, flowing lattice of light. As I'm imagining that in this moment, I'm feeling it actually, I'm having a sensation of feeling lighter, feeling more live, feeling more responsive. I think it's something worth exploring. I think it's something to practice. And it feels very different than putting up boundaries, because it takes a lot of energy to maintain those boundaries also. And the boundaries, in my experience, for most of us, those boundaries come with a call to defend them. And there, that becomes reactivity and conflict and separation and resistance. You know, like, don't cross that boundary. It takes effort from me, and it creates all kinds of potential for conflict that doesn't have to be there. Whereas if I'm this lattice of light, this coherent, organized, living lattice of light, then things flow around, and some things can move through. So it's a shift, it's a conceptual shift, but I think it's an energetic shift. And what I notice in our world right now is that we are very oriented toward this containment and container paradigm. And what that does is it is a definition of separation. And if we look at the issues that we face in this world, we can boil it down to a notion of separation versus oneness. And from this separation, we create othering, right? Don't cross my boundaries, whether it's personal or governmentally or social interaction internationally. So in moving to a new paradigm, rather than the boundaries, what if we can create ourselves as this coherent but more fluent and fluid presence? Because that allows for interconnection, it allows for interaction. And the purpose of boundaries is to prevent violation and to create protection. And I believe that the greatest protection is centered presence, that we don't need protection when we are coherent, when we are centered, when we are present, when we are integrated, when we are aligned. And I think that may be the greatest work any of us has, is to find that alignment. Because it's through that alignment that we then can be our most authentic expression. Good morning, Dido. So glad to have you here with us this morning. Welcome. So the boundary thing comes from fear and hurt and violation. And I understand it. And it's a powerful training wheel type tool, boundaries. But there's so much more available to us. And that is through cultivating our coherence, drawing in our energies to create this structure that has an organization that supports life. that supports our growth and our evolution, and that allows for unity because it's light, right? So it's a lattice of light among other lattices of light in a greater environment of light and energy. So if we think about, molecules interact with each other, Dido says, such a powerful concept, such a profound energetic shift that is available to us. Thank you so much for that, Dido. I agree. I think it's a really powerful energetic shift. And this emerged, I believe, from meditation, where it was just, well, wait a second. For the longest time, I've talked about that we don't need to be focusing ourselves on protection. We need to focus ourselves on integration. But this is kind of a next level of it. And protection at a certain level, again, training wheels. So I think it's important to use the tools that are available to us. And I think that this movement into greater coherence is really where we're headed, where we need to be heading, is really what the world is calling for, is this paradigm that allows for connection, that isn't about creating barriers, because boundaries are barriers also. And the more boundaries and barriers we have, the more we need. So what if we create this convergence of our own energies that will then give us the fortitude to be more fully expressed, to recognize our safety, to be more fully authentic in the world, and head towards something that we really want to be creating. So that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to please like, follow, and share Enlightened World Network and me. The links are in the description. And as always, it truly is a gift and a blessing to have the opportunity to share these morning musings on what it is to be human here